All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today here at Sound Collective 28 Broadway. We're very excited to have our Collective Connect series tonight, and we have a wonderful presentation from N2N, who I'd like to introduce, who's doing a session breakdown in Ableton. And as you came in, you might have received some Ableton goodies, and we are raffling off these two books right here. Making Music, 74 Creative Strategies for Electronic Music Producers, written by Dennis DeSantis. So let's just get right into it. We have N2N breaking down his track Lies, which recently came out on Insomniac. Amazing. So let's get right into it. Please welcome N2N.
All right, so we're going to get right to it here. I am going to start with kick drum. So I'm just going to take you through how I wrote this song, step by step. Actually, let's listen to it first, so I don't just say, here's a random kick drum. You have no idea where it's coming from. So let's listen to the song. The song is called Lies. It's featuring a vocalist called Yaros, who is amazing, and you're going to hear her voice right now. with my magical outro. But that's the track. There are a couple pretty key components to it. You've got the rolling bass line. You've got just pretty like basic syncopated percussions. You've got some piano chords. You've got a couple leads that are tying everything together. And you've got some vocals. So let's get right into it. Basically, the way I start any song is with a kick drum. So let's just start at 17 because we love randomness. And let's solo our kick. So I started with this. I know I wanted a triple kick every 16 bars. So just right away went ahead and added it in. And I like to work, when I work with drums especially, I like to work in either 2 or 4 bars at the very beginning. So I'll loop 2 or 4 bars. Let's loop 2 bars. And I just chose this sub kick that I really liked. Don't know where it's from. Phantom, Mirage kick, whatever. So it's got this really nice, like thick low end. It reminds me of, like a warehouse kick. To round out the top, I had this top kick that is, I think I just found a top kick. It's not EQ'd or anything. It just kind of balances out the sub kick. Because I like to have a little bit of high end on my kicks. If you're just listening to it like that, you're missing a little bit of the punch that the high end of the top gives you. And sometimes the kick sample that you choose has a lot of high end in it, and you don't really need to add the second kick, but this time I did. And it's really worth finding a couple, like when you organize your Ableton, and organization I'm about to talk about is really, really important to me. It's going to be super exciting for you guys. But when you find samples that you really like, save them. This is not my main production computer, so I don't really I don't really have a lot of like great things saved here, but save your samples and color code them. And I have on my other computer, I basically go through, I have kicks, hats, chords, patches, whatever. I have them all like kind of color coded. Anything that you can do to cut down the time that you're looking for things is awesome. Like you don't want to be spending half your production time scrolling through samples, scrolling through loops, scrolling through patches, because that's all that time you could be actually writing. You could be actually arranging. So if you have, it's worth spending a full day, 2 days, whatever, create these little banks for yourself, go through all of the loops that you have and tag the ones that you like and save them for later. Because then you can go back and you're like, oh, I fucking loved that loop. Let's make a song with it, or let's make something cool with it. So it's really worth putting the effort into having folders of things that you like that you can go back to and choose from, so you're not just it's like doom scrolling production. It's the worst. Okay, so we have our kick. The next thing I do is I organize like religiously. So I group my kick. So I have a kick group here, and then I create a tops group. Within the tops group, I have my hats, my claps, a ride, percussions, and this like breakdown percussion that we'll get to later. But if you're making house music, for me, I'm immediately going to go right to kick, hats, and claps. So these hats, I layered them with 5 different hats. Some of them I've pitched. Some of them I've thrown to the left. I think this one I threw to the right. Yeah. So 2 I have going down the center. 2 I have spread out, 1 left and 1 right, and that just adds some depth for your hats. You want, like, if you have everything going down the center, your song is going to sound pretty boring. I think having stereo width in all of your elements is really important, and hats, claps, etc. is included in that. And as you'll see with my claps, I do the same thing with my claps. I layer 4 of them. They're thrown, right down the center is my main clap, and then I should have. Oh, these are all center. This one's a wide one though, so I'll have 1 wide clap adding the depth there. Let's play. And this is a little like thrown offbeat hat that adds a little bit of texture as well. When I started this song, I knew I wanted it to be something rolling, and so that you need a lot of loops for that, at least in the rolling house music that I like to make. And so you have your like foundation of your kick and your hats and your claps. This sounds pretty good. Or like we're moving along. Sounds good. Okay, so now let's start throwing some loops in there. And this is again pulling from things that I've saved over the last year or so. So you're gonna add this one here. And it's important that all of your loops kind of sound good together, because if, it's really easy, especially when you're layering 2, 3, 4 loops, percussion loops on top of each other. It's really easy for things to start sounding super muddy, like crumbled together. The last thing you want is for your track to sound jumbled and muddy. And I've probably went through 20 or 30 loops here, testing, A being, addition by subtraction is pretty huge in production. I'm sure you guys know. So just keep layering. These sound good together. These are kind of like symbiotic loops here. Okay, what else do we want? Nice. So we've got a good foundation of our loops there. We've got a good foundation with our hats, kick, and claps here, and we can combine them all together to sound like this. It's kind of tribally. Let's get to our bass. Because we have so much movement in our tops, the bass actually sounds like it's doing a lot more than it is. And it sounds like it's hitting a lot like more notes than it is. They're only 3 different notes. 1, 2, 3, 4 different notes. No, 3 different notes, because this is octaves. So 3 different notes that this bass is hitting. Let's solo it. And one of the tricks that I like to use, especially if you're making house music, especially if you're doing rolling basses, is using octaves in your bass. And so we've got an E flat here, and then we go up, and then we have a G flat here, and then it goes up. So the only thing that's not an E flat or a G flat is this passing tone, this like F right here. That's just functioning as a passing tone. It's like, oh, let's add some spice, some flavor to our bass line. But the rest of it is they're just 2 notes with this one kind of rogue F in there. But interesting pattern, and throw it up an octave, and you've got a moving rolling bass line. The danger with adding too many notes in here is that's like, too many notes equals too much going on, equals too busy, which the last thing that you want in your track is it to be too busy. Simplify, simplify, simplify is like the best production advice I've ever gotten. It's the best production advice I can give. And it's something that I still need to work on. I'm sure to have some people tell me that, I've layered too many loops in here. I have too many hats, I have too many claps, whatever. I mean, I probably do. Okay, let's see. But yeah, so let's play this bass line with just the kick and just the hats and the claps. Okay. So that kind of bass line obviously doesn't lend itself well to just a kick, a hat, and a clap. A lot of bass lines do. If you're doing like some stutter, like 8-note tech house, really fun just to have the kick and the hat and the clap super, super tight. I have a song that I'm working on right here. That is just that. Super, super simple. Kick, hat, clap, that's all you need. But it's, the bass line is going to determine the type of percussion that you want. And if you're working on something rolling, just the kick, hat, and clap isn't working there. So you got to have these percussions that really drive the rest of the song. 16th notes in there. I mean, following the 16th notes of the bass line. Super, super nice, super snappy, very funky. So we have the foundation of our track already. Again, like songs are pretty simple. Once you have a few things dialed in, you can start arranging, and then it's all about, adding okay, do you want chords? Do you want a melody? Do you want vocals? Whatever. But with just a bass line and your drums, you can arrange a full track. And at that point, like once I have these 8 to 16 bars, or really just, honestly, it's just 2 bars, but if you make it 8 bars, you can sketch out a full arrangement. So we have these 8 bars here. This is still just our drums and our bass. And the way that I created this bass is I basically just put an auto filter that is only letting, it's only letting the frequencies, what am I at? Below 242 hertz to pass. And then the way that I've created my turn is I've just like opened up that auto filter. Open up the auto filter, and I've also worked on Sharam, and I have the filter cutoff going up here. Okay, so we have our 8 bars, and now it's time to go up to the top and start like really sketching out your arrangement. So this particular song, I wanted to have a long-ish intro because it's a rolling track. I want to give people time to get into the bass line. So I have 8 bars of high pass drums. No sub in the kick. After that, we're gonna go 8 bars, or 16 bars, 16 bars with everything high passed, no sub in the kick. We're gonna bring the bass line in after 8 bars. Sounds great. After 16 bars, we have the auto filter on the bass. We bring in the sub of the kick, and that gives us like, okay, now we've got a groove going. So if you're transitioning, if you're DJing, right? I like to DJ, the first 16 bars I'm kind of mixing in. When 17 comes in, I'm gonna flip the low end, have the bass come in, and it gives people a little bit of time to groove on this. So you're gonna groove on this, you're like, all right, sweet, got this going for 8 bars, yeah? And the way that I'm kind of bringing the energy in is through this vocal here, which we'll get to later. Okay. The way that I like to do my arrangements is by sketching everything out beforehand. So once we have our 8 bars, we have our bass line that we like, we have our drums that we like. It's time to, figure out where we want everything to go. And then you kind of build around that. It's like cheating a little bit to me because, but you can obviously make adjustments as you go. Since I wanted a longer intro this time, I decided to have 40 bars of intro, 16 of which is that high passed, and then you have 24 of the groove building into verse 1. And so what I've done is I've just gone ahead and I've set a marker here. This is verse 1. I know this is, again, before we have vocals. This is before we have anything. I'm setting this up so I can quickly arrange it out. So I'm typing in verse 1 there, and then I know we want 16 bars of a verse right before it drops. So maybe 8 bars of a verse, 8 bars of a hook, 8 bars of something, 8 bars of something. I like to have 16 bar builds in my first breakdown. So if I'm doing, and it's kind of like this, pattern that I've repeated in a lot of my records where I'm like, okay, I want an intro. I want the groove to kick in after 16 to 24 bars in the intro. Once that first intro groove is done, I want a 16 bar break where you can kind of like build up a little bit more energy, then really lock into your first like main climax part. And then you have that for 24 or 32 bars, and then you have your big breakdown, then you have your big climax, and you have your outro. So if you kind of have that framework stuck in your head, all of this is adaptable depending on the song that you're writing, but you have that framework stuck in your head, you can get a skeleton arrangement out in a day. Especially if you have you have your bass that you like, you have the drums that you like, you can copy paste that. all out, throw a fucking EQ on it, you know, for your breakdown parts. So you have that like high passed section of your track, and then lo and behold, you've got a 4.5, 5 minute song right off the bat. Even though you only have 3 elements, it is the, you know, framework for you to play everything else. You can arrange everything else on top of that. And so if we're zooming out here, you can say, okay, great. Got verse 1 here, 16 bars, got drop 1 here. Decided to take this for 24 bars, break here. But then I did a little bit of a, you know, an adjustment here, and then this is actually 14 bars later. I had the break. Anyway, I decided to take this 32 bars of a drop because I had another verse, and then I added melodic 8 bars, and then big breakdown here. And I knew I wanted this breakdown to be, you know, much larger. It's obviously going to be more than 16 bars because this is a vocal track, and it's, you know, if you're doing like a banger, if you're doing tech house bangers, you could just do a couple different 8 16 bar breakdowns and not have a single like big breakdown. But this one I wanted a big breakdown, and then the last drop I forgot to make a note of, but I think it's right here. It is. So it is a 24 bar big breakdown, and which I also like. I think 24 bars for your last breakdown is a good balance, because if you're doing 32, I don't know if you're making melodic techno, maybe that's cool. But for me, as an audience member on a dance floor, I kind of get bored after 30. If you know, as a 32 bar break. And so if you're playing your whole song, then I like a 24 bar break, because it gives you enough time to really like flesh something out, add something beautiful, add some like chords, have this moment, and then still build up into something sweet. So let's do last drop here. And then you have your end. And so adding these, like I always work with these markers up here. And one of the first things I do after I have the first loop that I like is sketch out a full arrangement. And it's going to sound ridiculous, and it's going to be the same thing happening for 5 minutes, but it's the piece of paper that you can draw the rest of your song on. And that's what I did for this. So getting into the verse. So now I have the idea. If I have my full arrangement, now I can go back and work backwards. So I'm like, sweet. I know I want this verse to come in after 40 bars. I've got my loop. I know I'm turning the fucking kick on right here. Let's add one thing for the first 8 bars to start to build it up, and then let's add another thing for the second 8 bars. So right when we hit into the verse, we're gonna have like some nice elements building on top of each other. So we had the kick come in here. We're gonna start with the vocal. So this is just her saying lies. And another trick that I love is if you're working with vocals, cut vocals, like cut them and make a pad out of them. Make something else that's not just a vocal out of the vocal that you have. A bed, making a vocal bed is super, super easy. I can show you right here how I did this. And this is gonna go through basically the entire song. It adds so much depth, it adds so much texture to your track, because it's a pad, and it's a sound that nobody else is gonna have. It's like a chord or a pad or whatever that nobody else is gonna have, because you wrote this vocal, you recorded this vocal. So I think all I did was I stretched her saying lies and I pitched it down an octave. And so it's this like cool kind of like lower texture. And you can hear, if you play the song without it, how much it adds. So if you're making house music, you see why people add that like high string that's repeated throughout the whole song, or you have that like kind of pad that you don't know it's there, but you notice it when it's gone. Every great track has stuff like that, because it's adding so much depth that you don't even know exists. So this particular song, the depth comes in that vocal pad. A lot of people use like white noise as texture. Crackles in the background is a really common one. High strings, just pads that are sitting in the background. Whenever I'm making tracks, I always want to find whatever that element is that's going to add that depth that you're going to, you don't notice if it's there necessarily, but you know if it gets taken away. So we have this coming in with an auto filter. It's kind of adding, it's building up a little bit. We're like, how are we moving into the verse? How are we flowing into the next moment? 8 bars later, here's our high string. A little bit of a vocal fill. 8 bars later, here are our piano chords. Now we're ready for our verse. So if you have an intro that's that long, kind of gradually adding elements and gradually building things is a way to keep people interested. It's a way to create some tension, and so you're ready for whatever's coming next. And I mean, the easiest and the simplest way to do it is just automating a filter, automating an EQ. You see what's happening here with my chords. So I just have an EQ here, and I have the high frequencies slowly being added back. I'm not a master producer, and so I generally look for the easiest way to do things, which I think is the right way to do it. Personally, I'm not really trying to do anything mind blowing or groundbreaking here. I'm just trying to what's the best way and the easiest way for me to convey the point that I'm trying to make, and bringing things in slowly and nicely does a great job. Do the same thing with the vocal, and it's just like you see this filter automating up all the way up until the verse, and then I have the filter cut down for her vocal. Whenever her voice is in, I have the filter go back down so it gives room. That frequency range allows for her vocal to breathe a little bit more. Okay, let's move on to the verse. So we've moved through our piano chords, and these are chords I just played on my piano at home. I'm going to take out the vocals for now, just because this is how I wrote it, and adding them back in later. So I knew I wanted 16 bars here. So I'll just... So right there. So much of production for me is basically figuring out the 5 or 6 elements that you love that are part of your track, and then selectively adding and removing them to convey different points, right? Okay, so we have our first verse, it's gonna kick in, we've got the chords coming in right away. I just layered the same chords with a couple different patches. So I've had these strings, our high string is here. I have the strings playing the chords. I have another string patch. I have the piano. And then I've took out some of the tops. So I've got 2 tops, 3 of the tops still in, 4 of the tops still in, 2 of them are gone. Kick is gone. Hats and claps are gone. And then you're adding stuff back, because if you're having a 16-bar breakdown, your first 8 bars is going to be a little bit milder than your next 8 bars because you're building up into something. You're trying to add more tension before the drop hits. So we add the Rhodes back, and there's something I like to do is we introduce the Rhodes by resampling the first hit and then reversing it. And again, these are the same exact chords that the piano is playing, the same exact chords that the strings are playing. It's just different instrument, adds a little bit of a different flavor. And then we add the kickback. Do we add the claps back? No, we just keep the same tops going. We have our little snare roll down here. Adding it in now. Add the bass in. So Something I love to do for my breakdowns is I just take the same bass pattern that I have in the main bass and I use a different patch for it. If you have the same bass patch going throughout an entire song, it can get pretty old pretty quickly. So you find something, I like to find something similar, and it can even be the same patch, just, tweaked with a little bit. So it can be like, oh, okay, I think this is actually the same patch. I've just adjusted some of the settings so it sounds slightly different. This one's slightly more like acidy than the main one. And it's playing the same thing, so it's instantly recognizable, but because it's a slightly different sound, it's not gonna be like droning and repetitive. One of my biggest pet peeves when I'm listening to music is if I just hear the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, which is hard. It's a hard balance to strike because most of house music is the same thing over and over and over and over again. So how can you do same but different? Which again, selective adding and removal of things that you've already written is essentially same but different. Let's add the vocals back. So the order that I added stuff in, that's a good question. I actually added the piano. So I added the piano after I added, remember we have our full arrangement. So we have our full arrangement because we had our little drum loop that we liked and we have our bass that we liked. And then we stretched it out all the way until the end. And we added some, some like filters just to make sure that, okay, our breakdown's coming, we're gonna take the low end out, whatever, just so it sounds a little bit different. The next thing I added were the chords. It's like, okay, well, this can't just be like this the whole time. What emotions that I wanna get across? I want it to be a little bit dark, a little bit moody, a little bit brooding. So I added chords right after that. And then when we get to the drop, so then I have like, okay, I'm adding the chords. Now I have a verse that we're getting into. I layered the chords in a couple different patches. So we have some depth, we have some different textures, we have some different elements playing the same things. And then, then you get to the drop, and I'm like, okay, sweet. What do I need to add in here that is going to make it pop a little bit more? Because I got the bass coming back in, I've got the kick coming back in with all of the low frequencies. What can I add that is that's like grimy, that's a little bit like filthy, that's dark but not like too dark, And at the very beginning, actually, when I was writing this song, I had all of these loops in, so it went right into all of this. So it went right into this. But after working on it, I was like, we need a little bit of a break from these. Again, these tops go through most of the track, as you can tell, they're everywhere. So we need a little bit of a break from that. And what can we? Let's drop them out and let's add something that really like hooks you. It's got to be a big sound that really grabs you. And so I came up with this little line here. That is actually from this Sharam patch right here. And it's the same note in octaves. So we're not trying to write anything crazy. We're not trying to complicate things too much. And then you start working with call and response especially when you're working with the leads. You have to work with some call and response. So that needs to be responded by something, which is this little like, that's all it is. Because if that's by itself and you don't have that little like staccato response afterwards, it's gonna sound like it's gonna sound like its puzzle piece is missing. Think about it like your call and response and your leads, and you're gonna have it in most elements of your track. It's gonna be in your drums, it's gonna be in your bass, it's gonna be but it's most pronounced in different lead elements that you have and different sounds that are playing together on the top. It's gonna sound weird without it. Sounds like something is missing. I have another synth up here that's kind of like, I don't want this sound that's huge to come in all the time because then it would just be overpowering. So I have something else happening up here. But then I have my response still. Now we get into a different section of more fun stuff. So we have those 16 bars of the first drop where you have that first impact and it's really nice. But then for it to keep going for another 24 bars, you got to have something else that's happening. And again, can't be too much because, can't be something that's too new, too over the top, because then your song is going to get jumbled and muddy, which is the last thing we want. And so for this particular record, I figured that there could be some more movement in the mid-range of the bass, could be something that we add that's like adds a little bit more energy to it. So I decided to add this this like moving kind of acidy synth line that just mirrors the bass, and it adds a little bit of depth to the bass. And then I added this acid line as like a little bit of another response. So what's playing together for me are these three sounds in our like lead range or like mid range here. So those are like a family. It's a family unit. And they are friends with our bass line and the bass unit here, which is... So everything, like I want everything to function independently, but also together. So you kind of have these groups of things that work well together, but also work well with the whole song. And they're gonna add, that's the secret sauce in this particular record, is these like call and response moments that work with the vocal as well. Because I'm working with this vocal bed, I'm also working with a lot of like ad libs that are creating some texture and working like this one. We're setting up our breakdown by cutting out the tops, keeping the bass in, and then bringing the piano chords back. Taking out all the call and response stuff because we want to save this call and response stuff over here for our big moments. We don't want to overdo it. We don't want to overuse it. We like it a lot, but we want to save it for like the big energy. And when we're bringing energy down, it's all about what we're taking out. So we have our pianos that we're bringing back in preparation for the big breakdown, because to me, if it's, you want to add some chords back, I like to bring them in slowly. I don't like to just slam people with chords out of nowhere. I'm going to, either bring it in with this automation here, or I'm just going to bring it in out of the drop with the bass and the kick still going. And then we get to our breakdown. So this is, again, we wanted a 24-bar breakdown, which means that we can look ahead and say, do I want the snare roll? Do I want our big like build to start happening after 8 bars or after 16 bars? I think in this particular song, I wanted it to start happening after 8 bars. I'm pretty sure that's where it comes in. Where are you? Let's play it here. Yeah, okay, you can hear the snare coming in after 60. Yeah, it's right here. And again, our favorite thing to do automate it with the filter. So much movement you can create just with an auto filter. It's the best. Simpler, the better. So our big breakdown, again, we have our chords that we wrote in one pass, and we've layered with a couple different strings. Layering your chords is super fun, really great way to like add depth and texture to your tracks. Have a chord that you like, have a chord progression that you like, and then just find a couple different instruments that it sounds cool with, and then bring them in and out. Try different things. This particular song, I wanted the piano to be my main element, but it needed a bit. This is the Rhodes. It needed a bit of sauce to it. It needed some spice to it. So I added this Rhodes here. Added the string. So now we have some real nice like flavor and depth to our chords. Even though it still sounds like a piano if you're listening to it in the context of a song, if you're only listening to the piano and none of these other layers, it would sound pretty thin. Okay, so when we're working on our breakdown, and for this song in particular, and every song is different, but for this song in particular, I wanted to. Let's see, let's unsolo this. I'm in between lands and I see that everything I say you ignore. How can it be? How can it be? I wanted to bring our tops in really slowly. So we have the tops coming back in after 8 bars of the breakdown. We kind of let her voice just be for 8 bars because she has this really, really cool kind of like bridge section that is unlike anything else that she wrote in the track. And so when I originally wrote the instrumental and I got the vocals back, the tops were happening throughout the whole breakdown. Again, we had our loop that we liked and we spread it, we extended it for the whole song. And so when we started working on this, the loop is everywhere and you got to selectively figure out where you want to remove it. I got the vocals back with the chords and I was like, that's exactly where we should just remove it because her voice is so nice and it lends so well to just what's happening after that first drop. Then we were like, okay, we need a space for her voice just to breathe. And we're coming out of this section beforehand where we have only the kick and the bass and the chords. And so why would we bring, if her voice is so nice there, we don't need to bring the tops back yet. And so you'll see I have them in, but I actually turned the whole channel off for this particular section. And then I brought them back 8 bars later, but I have this filter on it. So they're coming, when they come back slowly with the kick. Play the breakdown without the vocals because then I think it'll make a lot more sense to why I did that. So having this little bit of a space here where it's still moving, things are still like, ooh, okay. It's like, I don't love having that pure emptiness. A lot of songs that like Icy out there have that like 8 bars of very, very little anything, where it's just like a string. And when I'm on a dance floor, something's got to be happening. And so if I'm going to take my tops out, if I'm going to take all of my drums out, it's got to be something that is going to grip people and people want to listen to. I mean, that's me personally. I know a lot of people that love that like empty moment where nothing's happening and kind of just like, meh. But I want people to be like paying attention, really like, oh, this is grabbing people. And so having these like nice chords, it's got to have a great vocal on top of it. She did a great job with this like one particular section where she's really got this like awesome movement in her voice. And so I think that that's the time to strip everything out and then start bringing it back 8 bars later. And when the reason I love a 16 bar buildup in tracks like this, I mean, all dance tracks, I love a 16 bar buildup, is because you expect the drop to happen after the first 8 bars. So if you're dancing to this at the club and you hear the snares come in here, a lot of people expect the drop to happen there. And so they're really getting really amped up, and then extending it by 8 more bars just adds a lot more tension. So when you finally hit them with it, they're like, the explosion, the payoff is worth it. I love a 16 bar buildup, especially if you're able to like really make it seem like after the first 8 bars, they're gonna get what they want, and then just drag it out just a little bit longer. Ugh, so nice. So nice. So I always work with, I start my snares. If I'm doing a snare roll, I always start at 16 bars ahead of where I want to drop it. Okay. Last drop, I think everything, we had the first drop where we took out the tops, but for the last drop, after that big buildup, after the long breakdown, everything has to come together all at once. And it's just like all of the parts that we've written, except for the piano, are going to be there right away. So these like this top part of the bass that we added in the second half of the first drop is there right away. We have the big synth that I wrote here. We have our high string that's layered with our vocal pad, that's layered with all the tops. We even added these 2 rides to just add more, as much energy as we can after that long buildup, because house music or dance music is all about tension and release. And this is the release of all of the tension that we've built through the breakdown, through the 16 bar buildup. It all culminates in this moment. And then we add the piano chords back after 8 bars. Add the hook of the hook of the vocal back. And then you kind of start mixing, you're thinking about your next song here if you're performing. So the last drop, and it's kind of antithetical because I remember when I started making music, I always wanted my last drop to be the most epic and the longest, and it's got all the stuff going on. But in practicality, if you're DJing in practice, you're going to start mixing into your next song probably after 16 bars of the last drop. So make the first 16 bars really hit, and then just let the groove ride out for however long you want the song to keep going. And that's kind of like how I built this song. I'd love to. Does anyone have any questions about the song, the writing process on this? Does anyone want to know anything at all about this one? What took me the longest to create? The vocal. Vocal, I was working with Jacqueline's her name. We worked for almost 5 months to write this vocal. So the instrumental itself we put together in a couple days, especially because we got a bass line and a drum loop that we liked pretty quickly. And like I said, we're able to arrange it really quickly and wrote the chords in 1 pass on a piano, and then just took the MIDI. I recorded the MIDI and took the MIDI and just layered it on it with a couple different sounds that I liked. And then from there, it's all about, selectively adding, selectively subtracting, and, having a song that kind of flows together nicely. Like I pointed out in the intro, we're like, okay, let's add the piano here. Let's add the string here. Let's kind of have it build. And then you kind of do that for the whole song. You obviously want your piano chords and the breakdowns. You kind of write them right there on the breakdown. Then you create this build up, and you have everything come in at the last drop. And then what goes on top of it? the vocal's got to be perfect. And we went through, I'd say, 7 or 8 different iterations of this vocal over a couple months. And the way that we wrote it actually is it ended up being different than the way that it sounds in the, even the final like melodies, the top line that we used, chopped up and rearranged. And, I think this part, It's All a Lie, came before I'm on.
In your eyes,
This was originally the chorus, I think.
it's all a lie.
And I think that was something else. That was somewhere else. And you kind of just like chop it up and figure out what goes where and what sounds good. And you go through a ton of different iterations of it. But the vocal for sure took the longest. Yeah. So it's a fun trick that I love to do is just taking if you have like a main part of your vocal,
It's all a lie, it's all a lie.
just pitching it down an octave and having that be,
It's all a lie.
where is that? It's in some other, I think it's this part. You don't have to lie, yeah, that I pitch down. And it can be a really fun like textural element. It can be a good moment of like a transition. This particular song, I used it in like the when we cut out all the tops right before the breakdown. It's kind of a good signifier of like, okay, we're heading into a different section now. We're heading into where our emotions are about to change as we're listening to this song. We're like kind of gonna wind down before we wind back up. I mean, think about like the way I like to think about writing house music or dance music in general is it's a roller coaster that goes up and down and up and down. And what moments do you want to go up? What moments do you want to go down? And it's all got to flow together nicely. It's all got to make sense. So this is a moment where we're starting to go down. I don't like to go down too quickly. I don't want to just like drop, vertically. In that part, it's not like a roller coaster because I want to do that on a roller coaster, but in a track, like I want to go down gently. And so this is a moment, like a stripping out. If you have like a great trick to go down gently is if you have a bass that you love and you have a kick and you're just like, okay, I'm just gonna play the kick and the bass for 8 bars before I get into the breakdown, because it's kind of like signifying to the audience that we're about to go into a different part of the song. Then you can, bring different things back, but in a way that, you can bring the piano back here. You can bring the vocal back here. You can even bring the tops back here, slowly, but I decided not to, just for dramatic effect. Yeah, it's a good question. So there are a couple like kind of foundational things that I like to do, especially with like hats and claps if I'm layering them. Okay, so I definitely, and this is all up to the song and it's all up to your ear at the end of the day. It is your ear that is making the decision. But to start off, I really like to say, okay, I'm gonna have one hat right down the middle, and I'm gonna have 2 hats in the background that are panned left and right, and they're gonna be much more subtle than the hat that's going down the middle. That's gonna be my main hat, but I'm gonna have another 2 hats that are adding a little bit of width. And then I do the same thing with claps. And so you kind of start as a baseline with 3 hat layers and 3 clap layers. Picking the sample is really important here. And sometimes you have like, okay, I have a hat sound or a shaker sound that already is wide, and you just use that as one layer and it serves the same purpose. But starting off is like a rule of thumb, having one that's panned left, one that's panned right, and one that the main one that you're listening to right down the middle is something that I like. Other people that are very much against layering hats are probably better producers than I am, who are better engineers than I am and can make it sound wide without doing what I need to do. But to me, I think it just adds more texture and depth to your drums. Your drums are going to be more like sound fuller, and they're going to sound like beefier that way. Ooh, that's a good question. I love writing like ear candy, and so that call and response parts of the leads, that's all little like ear candy moments, like this little acid line here, and this little like this thing here, that adds so much to the song, and it's they're like 2 notes that make a big difference. I love writing stuff like that. It's super fun. I think I wrote this whole song in Sharam, besides the chords, which are all my Korg SV2, but everything else I use Sharam. I think the bass as well. Before we get to the raffle, I think it's just, addition by subtraction is the best lesson that I can give here. So write everything you want, arrange it, and then take things away, add them back. you really only need like 6 elements in your track, and it's all about selective addition and subtraction. That's gonna make the rest of your song. And that's all the time I got. Thanks for listening, guys.